And grace, of course, is something big, but you see, it's not for their sake that he did this, it's for the sake of the first. You see, he remembered the covenant of the first. You didn't do anything that you deserved, that this document is saying, but God remembered his covenant. And therefore, he didn't destroy everybody. So that's grace. Not the grace we're familiar with, but it's a form of grace. It's not because you did anything or you deserved it. It's by the grace of God. That's English. This is a more primitive Dead Sea Scroll way of saying a similar thing. We'll see elsewhere in the Damascus document we have a form of grace here. He left a remnant. Now this is history now, and did not deliver it up to be destroyed. So we've already kind of like encapsulated 1,000 years of Jewish history in one sentence, and now we're going to go a little slower. And in the age of wrath, 390 years after he had given them into the hand of the king Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, he visited them. Now this 390 years in the early days of Qumran research created a lot of issues. Is it literal or is it not literal? For the ones who like to put all this back in the 2nd century BC, it was great. It was, sure, now these people have a precise date now. You can figure it out here, it's about 190 BC or something like that. I don't have the exact numbers in my head. But honestly, if you look at Josephus or rabbinic literature, they don't have an actual understanding of the chronology of this period. They don't really know how many years went by up to their present time from, let's say, the time of Cyrus. They're not that smart. You say, well, these people were smarter. Okay, maybe they weren't. But, and this is for you to decide if you think this is accurate, if this is supposed to be literal, fine. So you've solved your problem. But I don't think it is literal in the sense that one of the people that the Dead Sea Scrolls prophets they really admire is Ezekiel. We're talking about the destruction of the temple by Nebuchadnezzar. What happens to Ezekiel when he hears the news of the destruction of the temple by Nebuchadnezzar, if you've read the prophet Ezekiel? I'm the only one who knows. That's because I taught Old Testament and New and so on and so forth. I wouldn't have known it if I hadn't taught Old Testament over and over and over again in these universities too. Teaching these classes over and over and over again is really great because if you go to Harvard, you teach one little course maybe in a term on some abstract a problem that you might be studying, and you let all the assistants do all of the rest. So the fancier the research institute you're at, the less you have to teach the texts. Here we had to slave in the trenches, 4 courses a term, and to stop from going mad, I used to teach as many different ones as I could. So I teach Old Testament, New Testament, Dead Sea Scrolls, Zionism, Paul and James, historical Jesus, anything to stop from going mad. Teach the same thing over and over and over and over again. And we then got them all into GE. That's how we built this department up. It was mainly to avoid going mad. Because the courses wouldn't go if they didn't get into GE. So then you had to fight all the other departments who didn't want to let your courses into GE because they would take an enrollment from their department. And this is what drives you mad about faculty and academic struggles. Kissinger said it would be great if the stakes were they're so intense because the stakes are so little. The stake is so minuscule. So anyway. It's Ezekiel. His tongue sticks to the roof of his mouth, and he cannot prophesy any longer for 390 days. And you say, oh, well, that's just an accidental parallel. Maybe, maybe not. I think it is the reason they picked that number 390. And also because they're very into the chronology of Daniel, and they want to end up with 7 times 7 numbers of years, 490 years, so they, knock this back 100 years to 390, and it all appealed to them, the numerology appealed to them. I don't think it's accurate in any way, shape, or form. Symbolically, it's accurate. Why? Because Ezekiel can't prophesy any longer when he hears the number, the temple has been destroyed. Anyway, it may or may not, you'll have to decide for yourself. But the age of wrath, that's from Daniel. Or the era of wrath, I'm looking at Ramesh here. Again, delivered them into the hand again. Jesus is delivered into the hands of the Romans, so-called by Judas Iscariot. We'll talk maybe about that at some point. But here it is, he visited them. Now, usually in the Damascus document, it's he visited them for destruction. Just take a minute, even though I'm way behind this class, and run into Acts here, 15. Don't have to follow me, I'll read it to you. And James is talking at the so-called Jerusalem Council, and Peter speaks first, and this is Paul, everyone giving praise, and after they were silent, James answered and said, "Men, brothers," this is Acts 15:13, "listen to me, Simon has now told you how God first visited the Gentiles in order to take out a people for his name." That's really an odd use of visitation. God visited the Gentiles in order to take out a people for his name. And then he goes on with other things, quoting from the prophets and so on and so on. This is in Acts, and he ends up all his works, line 18, works are known. We just use known to God, works from eternity. Therefore I judge. Do judgment. We are not to trouble those, his conclusion, we're not to trouble those who turn to God, but write to them to keep themselves from pollutions, the idols, fornication, strangled things, and from blood. And then he repeats in line 29. So we didn't want to burden you with a lot of things, but we think you should abstain from things sacrificed to idols, blood, from strangled things, and from fornication. And then if you want to know the third version of this, it's in Acts 21, since I've opened it here. 21, when Paul comes up to Jerusalem, and he goes in and shaves his head because of a Nazirite oath to show that he still keeps the law. So that all may know, line 24, James speaking, that what they've heard about you is not true, but you yourselves still walk in a regular way, keeping the law. Well, we know he doesn't. He keeps abuse on the law is a curse and so on and so forth.